Okay, I don't usually show the finished product before I talk about how I did anything, so don't look too close because basically I screwed up and my intro to this video, I somehow lost the video footage for that. So when the video starts, it doesn't really make sense because I said, it's the next day from what you just saw and you didn't really see anything. So yeah, I lost my intro. So basically, I was talking about starting the exhaust and the jacks, and I kind of left off from there in the last video. Um, but I started by fitting the pieces here, and they didn't fit. So I start off by saying it's a day later from what you just saw, but you didn't see that. So now you know what you didn't see. So now that makes perfect sense. So here's the video as interrupted. Okay, so it is actually the next morning from what you just saw because when I put that in place, it is worse than I thought. And I didn't want to make any rash decisions. So I went to bed and thought about it, and I woke up with an idea. So anyways, the way this is here, yeah, that's not going to work. If you try to put that, yeah, there's a problem. Hopefully you can see that that is not going to go on there. I mean, I could force it and jam it on, but it would be hitting really hard on this. It would be putting a lot of stress back here, and it would look bad. And I'm trying to remember the last model I did. I think, well, I know on the last model, we used the kit plastic pieces, and I think it actually sat back a little more. And I think maybe on the other one, it wasn't as badly offset. And what I did on that one, I think, was I sanded the end post at a slight angle, so that would go on at a very slight angle, and it wasn't that noticeable. But if I do that here, it'll be more noticeable and it would look bad. So I can't move the body back because the body is hard mounted at 6 points. You can't move the engine because it's hard mounted. There's no way I can cut that off and move it because that would screw up the whole side of the cowling here. So the only option, the only feasible option, is to cut that off. Now it's not glued on, it's just pressed onto the post. If you remember, there's a square plastic post coming off of the exhaust and a square hole in the piece here. So I'm going to cut off the post. I'll pull this back off. See if I can do this one-handed. Maybe it's on there kind of tight. Anyway, so I'll pull that off, and I will cut off the square post. And then what I'll do, I can't just glue it back on here because then there wouldn't really be any structural strength there. So what I'm going to have to do is come in here with a drill and drill a hole back in here so it's perfectly lined up with the side opening. Drill a hole through there, drill a hole through that, the same size, and pin it on with a piece of heavy gauge spring steel wire or a roll pin or something like that. And CA it all in place, rebuild with a little hump on the back, sand it all smooth, paint, touch it up, and then you'll never notice anything ever happened. I think that is really my only option for that. The one back here, well, it's set further back. So this one, I've got more room to make an S-bend and get that to line up. I really hope I don't have to cut that one off and move it because it's further back in there and I have less room to work. This one will be a pain enough as it is, but I think I can do it. And I'm really irritated I didn't think to do that before I finalized all of this because it's too late to take any of this apart and do this out in the open where I have plenty of room. So I'm really irritated I didn't think to do that first. For those of you building the same kit, that might be a good idea for you to do. Before you finalize or paint anything, just go ahead and move that mounting forward. I don't know, an eighth of an inch, quarter inch, I don't know. It wouldn't take much really. Let's just see here. Like that much. That's all you need. That is about 4.5 millimeters. That's really all you need. So do that before you finalize everything. Of course, your kit might be better or worse than this one. Like I said, the previous one I did was slightly better. This one is slightly worse, so you'll just have to dry fit it and see how it goes. So yeah, I'm really irritated at myself I didn't do that first, but let me go and start taking it apart and drilling some holes and pinning it, and I'll show you what those pieces look like before I finalize it in, then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so here you can see I've got the square post cut off. I've got a 2 millimeter hole drilled in, which should be straight in line here. So it's a 2 millimeter hole. And I've got the hump ground off and sanded smooth. And here's the other piece of that. And that is a 2 millimeter wire. And I drilled the hole actually into the metal piece, and that is now bonded into the metal piece, and then that whole opening is just filled with CA. So this will now go into that hole like that. And so now you can see it's lined up, and that is going to work so much better. So I just need to bond it in. I need to repair, man, that lighting is bad in there. But I'm going to have to repair what I did, like paint touch up and stuff like that. So that is what you got to do. And again, I wish I would have done that day one. Now you can get in there and do that, obviously. It's not too bad here. That one's going to be a little more difficult, and I am going to have to do something with it because that angle just doesn't match. If it was right there, like just moved from there to there, that fits pretty well there. So I'm going to have to do something similar here, if not the same thing. So I got to think about that back one a little bit better, because again, that's going to be harder to get in here and cut and drill and do stuff. So anyways, so yeah, I got to cut this piece to fit in here and get that set in and then fix that one. So let me get back to you once I got that done. Also, by the way, I don't remember if I told you this in a previous video, but that area here, I also drilled in from here all the way almost through the bottom, and that also has a 2 millimeter steel wire. I did that a while ago. Same thing here. I drilled from there all the way down to about here. So there's a 2 millimeter steel, spring steel wire here, and then holding that on, and then I'll do the same thing there. So that should be fairly sturdy and hopefully break proof, hopefully. So anyways, let me get that done, and we'll get back to you here in a little bit. Okay, so here we have the that piece is in place, and as you can see, I filled in here because the original kit part, there was like a raised hump on the top that lined up with that, and I had to sand that off. So I recreated that with a putty. I'll show you what I used for that here in a minute. And I also moved the other one. I was hoping I could get by without moving it, but no go for that. So I had to move it the same way I did this one. Now, as far as building up that putty right here, I still need to sand it. I need to sand it smooth and see if I can get a closer view with the bad lighting. It's probably not going to focus. All right. So yeah, I just mixed up some epoxy putty and packed it in. And so that just needs a little bit of light sanding and then paint touch up to match the rest of the exhaust. The one back there, I really can't get back in there to do that little bit of putty work. But what I'm thinking is, if I would not have done this one, if I would not have done this, nobody ever would have noticed. But I did it just because it felt wrong not to. But nobody's going to notice that I did this one. And I bet you nobody's going to notice that I didn't do this one. because it's just not really that visible. It's not that noticeable. But that putty that I used is this stuff. And I don't even remember when or where I bought this. Quick seal plastic repair. You just cut a piece off and mix it all up like Play-Doh. And that cures into a hard... that's what I mixed up. That's how much I mixed up for that little tiny bit right there. But that cures into a really hard, solid chunk. And that kind of looks like... Never mind. So anyways, so I have to paint that to match it up. And I've got this pipe ready to go in. Now this has that aluminum tube in it already. Can't really see it, but it's in there. That's the aluminum tube for the back one. So if we put this on, you can see how that goes on nice and neat, just like that. And I already test fitted the fender, and it does fit with the fender. So that one is done and ready to be glued in. And this one is pretty much ready to go. Now, one thing I learned, the aluminum rod that they send you is this stuff. And when they first said it's aluminum rod, I'm thinking, well, that's not going to work very well because aluminum is really bendy. This, I don't know what the heck it is. I mean, it's aluminum. But this is really stiff. I mean, this is really hard to bend. And what I tried with this one was I put the aluminum rod in it, and then I tried to bend it, and that just was not happening. So what I learned was you have to bend the rod first, and at that short of a length, you got to use pliers. You bend that to shape so that fits the way you want, and then you can shove it into the tubing here, and that'll just curve right around it and hold the shape. And so once I figured that out, it worked pretty well. So this is ready to put the aluminum rod in and then put that in place. And this is ready to go. And then the exhaust is pretty much done. But what I want to focus on before I finalize it, well, I need to paint that. I can do that first. But before I finalize that piece of exhaust, while it's out of the way, I want to focus on mounting the jack. Now the jack, when you order that from Motorcars, is cast brass. It's either brass or copper, probably brass. And this is what you're looking at here. This is after soaking it in liquid tin. I've showed this on the channel before. That's this stuff right here, liquid tin. This is meant for like tin plating copper traces on a printed circuit board, like when you make your own circuit boards, or whatever, you know, anything. I think it's brass or copper. Will just, and it's a chemical reaction. It just puts a very fine plating of tin on the surface of the copper or brass. But I get mixed results with it. Sometimes it comes out beautifully, other times it's kind of splotchy, other times it doesn't work at all. And it really has to do with how clean the base material is. Now, I went over that very thoroughly with a piece of Scotch-Brite to try to polish it up. And then I cleaned it very thoroughly with alcohol. And then I soaked it in the liquid tin for over 5 minutes. And it did an okay job. There's a few places that are kind of thin. You can see the brass shining through. But that kind of looks like natural wear. And then I did a wash, like a black wash, to try to pick out the hardware and some of the other details. And the reason why I did this is I was looking online for examples of a real car with this mounted. So I did a Google search of 1935 Mercedes-Benz jack. And I found a whole lot of photos of the real jack. Apparently you can still buy them. I think you can get some on eBay or whatever. But every photo I found of the real jack, they were all painted black. So I'm thinking, well, we'll paint it black. But I wanted to find an example of one mounted in the car so I could see exactly how it's mounted. That was harder to find. I found one photo. And as you can see in that photo, it's red. So I don't think that's a factory red paint job. I think whoever owns that car painted it red. which doesn't look bad. I'm kind of on the fence with red. I think red is a little bit much. I think it stands out a little bit too much. But yet, if I paint it black, it's just going to blend in with everything else and disappear. Now, I found another example. I found a photo, actually on Model Motorcars' website where they advertise this. They have a picture of somebody who installed this on their model, and they painted it white. And it's not a really good photo. It's kind of a small, fuzzy photo, so it's hard to see how they mounted it, but they did paint it white. And they had a photo of a real car, and it was red. Could have been the same photo I found, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. Now, the owner of this, he found a photo of somebody who mounted this on their Pocher model, and it was more of a silvery color. So he showed me that picture, and him and I both kind of like the metal look, like this silvery metal look, because it stands out, but not overly standing out like the red does, and it doesn't just hide in there like black would. But anyway, so I sent him a picture of this to find out what he thinks, if he likes this or if he'd rather it be black. I'm on the fence. I could go either way. I like this, but from other photos I've seen of the real car, very few photos I've seen, it's not technically realistic because, like I said, every one I've seen, except for that one red one, they were black. Of the real car, they were black. But I'm kind of on the fence. Like I said, black is accurate and black looks good, but it would just blend in. This looks good and it would stand out and look nice, but it's not technically accurate. So sometimes you just have to make that decision for yourself. Do you want it to be perfectly accurate or do you want it to look nice? So I'm still working this out with the owner. It's ultimately his call. It's his decision. I'm happy with either way. I would be perfectly fine with this or black, but like I said, it's up to the owner. I did get a pretty good picture. Well, that one I just showed you a few minutes ago. That's a pretty good picture of the top mount, of how that's held in. I cannot find any information on the bottom. So basically, that's going to set in here kind of like that. And there's a mount bracket up here. There's got to be something at the bottom, but I cannot find any photo showing the bottom. So I'm going to make the top bracket as close as I can to the photo. The bottom, I think I'm just going to make like a little brass cup or a tray with a flange that can bond on to the body for the bottom to kind of set in. So I think it'll look good. I think it'll look stock, even though I don't know what stock really looks like. So yeah, I got to make some bracketry for that to set in right there. And then final install the exhaust and touch up paint the exhaust where I modified it. And then this video will be done. So anyways, let me get some more work done and I'll get back to you here in just a bit. Okay, so here is that piece bent and ready to go in. Make sure you start long and just grind off a little bit at a time until it fits. So that one is ready to bond in, and you already saw this one. I started with the paint touch-up. I got to do a little bit more, and then that'll be done. And then I have the parts for the mounting brackets for the jacks, or the jack. And let me put the camera down and we'll take a closer look at those. All right, so again, there's the jack. Looking at photos, you can see there's like a bracket on the top. And in that photo, it didn't look like anything was on the bottom. I'm thinking there should be something at the bottom. I don't think you would want a big heavy jack just kind of hanging from a simple bracket, the bottom swinging around. You would think that would bend up the bracket. You don't think that would work well. I mean, maybe that's how it is. Maybe that's how the real car is, but I don't know. But you would think you'd want something at the bottom. But let's take a look at that top one first. It's just a strip of brass folded to try to mimic that shape in the photo. And I got a hole. It's hard to focus on this thing. Drilled a hole through here and through here. And that hole is for a wing bolt. And I just dropped it. That's why I put a paper towel over the car, so to give it a better background, and so if I drop something, I won't lose it. But a wing nut or a wing bolt that'll go through the hole. That is a simulated bolt. There's no threads on it. And that is from Model Motorcars. They have a hardware section, and they have a bunch of different wing nuts and wing bolts and stuff like that. Simulated bolts and all sorts of stuff. But I drilled a hole for that to go through. And so this basically, and again in one of the photos I saw, this was mounted this way. Every other photo I saw, it's mounted this way. So I think this is the right way. But that, we can spread that apart a little bit. Clips in that way, and then we can squeeze that down, put that simulated wing bolt in there. I will CA that in place. I did drill a hole in the firewall. That is just a probably an 080 bolt. And I just put a little bit of solder, probably can't see it, I just put a little bit of solder on the bottom of the bolt head there, just so it's not falling apart, just to hold it together when I bond it in. I'm not going to be able to get a nut on the back side of that because of where the hole goes through the firewall. I don't have access to that. So that will get CA'd in place. And then the bottom, I just made a little tray. I bent the edges up to try to, look like it's going around the curve on that bottom piece. So that just gives a spot for that foot to set. And that'll just get bonded towards the bottom of the firewall area. Don't know if that's accurate, don't know if that's correct, but I think it looks good. I think it's functional and it works, and I like it. So this, again, that bottom piece will just get bonded in right down there. And I will probably put a spacer under it. I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch spacer, just to lift it up a little bit. That'll just raise the whole jack up a little bit so it's not too far down in there. Of course, there's a hole in the firewall. But what I got to do, I've got to paint the bracket pieces. I'm going to go with the flat black. So I'm going to paint that, and then we'll get it all bonded in. I got to sand that a little bit. There's still a few little sharp edges and burrs on there. But again, that's just a piece of brass that started off just a scrap piece of brass like this. And it's thin enough, you can just cut it with scissors. And you just file the edges flat, drill the hole, bend it to shape, and there you go. So, like I said, when we get those painted, we'll get it all installed, and then I'll come back and I'll show you what it looks like all installed with the exhaust pipes all installed as well. Okay, there it is. So the exhaust pipes are in, and the jack is in. You can see the bracket, the wing nut bolt thing, the bottom piece there. So that is done. So the exhaust is done, the jack is mounted, and I think I've said this before, but I'll say it again. It would be really nice if Model Motorcars included a mounting bracket. Even if it was just like a photo etch piece, something, some way to allow you to mount it to the firewall there. Otherwise, you got to make your own thing, or just hot glue it up in there. Don't do that. You're just going to have to make your own bracket. So keep that in mind. If you decide to buy the jack, you're going to have to figure out how to mount it yourself. So anyways, now that that's done, in the next video, we will be focusing on the side fenders. I'm really anxious to start fitting the side fenders to see how well or not well they fit. So we'll find out in the next video. So until then, as always, thanks for watching.